There's a reason your circumstances will never change. Or the fact that you keep running into the same spots for that quote-unquote comfort. You are only attacking the surface level of that build-up in the subsurface, screaming, fuck the Matrix, not realizing that you are the Matrix. Our path is not to be this picking a side. It's understanding the ley lines. Becoming is not about suppressing, it's about embracing in order to initiate. What most find themselves doing is this collateral damage maintenance. The removing of the statues of identity, hoping to apply an aesthetically pleasing face. Truth is, your traumas and the aftermath of the traumas, they're the coordinates to the ley lines on which you build your current circumstances. Realizing you don't fit in is the trigger that you will have to embrace in order to awaken the dormant self. Welcome to the God Hour Podcast. Accessing the gridlock. Let's get into this. Grand rise, guys and goddesses. Divine day and blessed be. To your day, may it be everything you require to embrace the authenticity of your desire. Whether you a king or a queen, god or a goddess, titan, celestial, adept, initiate, occultist, alchemist, shaman, shamaness, healer, or the one that's stepping into their healing. Remember, today's the only day that matters. You are the only one that matters. And on today, I had a thought. Do you ever notice they never move? They ain't heavy quotes. No matter what you do, they never move. Here's the key. The key point is the things that you're trying to live and die by are always going to take you to the same point. These are the accesses to the ley lines. This week's session, Season 4, Episode 9. We'll get into the metaphysics of global warming. You know, I'm going to take that occult esoteric approach to global warming. We'll get into the polar cusp and the new lines of engagement. But before we get into that, you know I gotta give you that reading. And then we don't get into this. We don't get into this. Welcome to the God Hour. I'm your host, your occult psychologist, Papa Lucifer. Let's get ready. You know, of course, before we get into this, that's how you get through that reading. It's called Shuffle Up real quick. I'm gonna get old. Shuffle as we get into this ley lines, unlocking that grid power. So we talking about going into general energy read on that aspect. Get the card shuffled up real quick. Alright. I'm gonna good hit. Alright. First card of this week's reading is the Magician. The second card is the Knight of Pentacles. The fifth card is the Five of Wands. Well, I see some conflict. The fourth card is Strength. And fifth card is the Hermit card. You can't be skipping the processes. And this is one of those processes you can't skip the processes anymore. You gotta go through you have to go through this stuff. And this is being shown to us by the dedication that I'm seeing in the Magician card. When I look at the Magician card and the illustration, it shows dedication to the hidden talent, the hidden aspect of ourselves. It's time to really take this time to really look inside yourself for what is hidden under beneath. There's no more, none of this. Stop looking at the surface to try to get things to connect to you. Stop trying to get to things from the surface and trying to make that the narrative of how you're moving forward. That statuous idea that you had based on life, it doesn't exist. This is pulled up by that Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles talks this is aspects of grounding yourself in your work, grounding yourself and paying attention to the path that you're on. A lot of times we come into this space and we try to use it as another punchline or another tagline, taking information. We try to use it as another tagline. We use it as another punchline or something to use it for. We're trying to use it for other when it was supposed to be used for. So right now for you, if you are using this information, you coming into your new self, you coming into your awareness, you coming into, you gotta go deeper. The Magician talks about uncovering those talents within yourself. The talents of your true self are the things that are based in your soul purpose. What you're supposed to be doing. Before you find what you're supposed to be doing, it's really time to start sitting down and really expanding yourself in environments that match that. That's where that ground is gonna come in. What I'm seeing also is through the 5 of Wands, I'm seeing that conflict. A lot of you are having that conflict with grounding yourself and allowing yourself to be able to allow the information, allow the knowledge, allow that inner work to actually get in there and actually crack that seed open. We become so quick on the instantaneous aspect of, okay, cool, I learned how to meditate. Ooh, or I meditated a couple days out the week, or I got some crystals, or I got shit like this. That's deeper than that. That's not what that's not spirituality. That's not the aspect. We always look at it based on, okay, now I'm off this side of the line, I'm on this side of the line. That's what that conflict is. You're going through that conflict. You're trying to choose which side that you're going to be on. When the key is to understand that everything on one side of that line, based on where you're coming from, is going to help you understand where you're going to. So you need both sides. So cutting off one side, this is why a lot of times you start to feel very weak, is because you're denying the aspect of yourself. Everything that you know right now, that would be the masculine aspect of what is the scene. That's what the scene is. That's the stuff that you know. The feminine aspect, or the wisdom and the guidance, the spiritual aspects that you're coming into, that's the unseen. Everything you came into in this space is bringing the emotional aspects, the triggers, all of that is to bring the scene, the unseen into the scene. And that's what you're gonna have to be sitting there in that hermit stage, that hermit mode. I tell people all the time, stop trying to skip that hermit stage. If you take that time, sit down to yourself, because you are going to be forced to sit with yourself. You're about to be forced to sit with yourself. Keep fighting it. Keep running away from it. Keep not dealing with it, and that's what you're going to keep getting. There is no more of this, okay, I'll handle it later. There is no more putting this shit under the rug. You are in a space right now where everything is leading to a head to where it's going to literally force you to sit down with yourself. You're literally being put in a position where you have to sit there with yourself. Really sit there instead of the aesthetics, to keep yourself aesthetically pleased. It's time to really get deep and down in that work for yourself. That's how you're gonna unlock those talents. That's how you're gonna find that grounding that you've been searching for your entire life, all this time. That's how you're going to see that the conflict is natural. Conflict is a natural part to signify progression. If you're not having conflicts, if you're not having those conversations, then you're not progressing. A lot of us come into a space with our time where it's like, we think, okay, cool, we can keep this person and keep this person and keep these people and keep that job and keep this. It's not gonna work. For myself, I use that as an example. When I started uncovering, and I'm not talking about this, the conscious aspect. I'm talking about when I really started uncovering the inner work, going through that shadow work. That's when I realized I could not go back to where I started, where I stemmed from. I couldn't go back to it. I realized there was no need to go back. That's the major key. I realized there was no need to go back. And until I understood that, that's when I came through that space like I was losing strength. I always had to find something outside of myself. This is what a lot of us do. We find something outside of ourselves to give us meaning, to give us the definition, to give us a purpose. And since we don't understand our own purpose, you don't understand your lessons. It's time to sit down with yourself. The hermit goes into aspects of you sitting down with yourself. That's how you go. It's time to find that inner strength. It's time to allow the conflict to arise. Because what you're seeing, I'll give you an example. What you're seeing in conflict outside of you is reflections of the work that you're not doing for yourself. So if you're in spaces and environments where you're seeing a lot of fights back and forth, look at the conflict. Really look at the conflict. Go outside of the imagery. Go through the emotional aspect. It's going to take you through the biases. And you're going to be looking at individuals that are around you. Look at how they handle conflict. That is a reflection of how you're handling your that's how you're handling yourself. Remember, everything is meant to be experienced or observed. But everything does not have to be firsthand. You don't have to have a firsthand experience to observe. And you don't have to observe everything through a firsthand experience. This has been your weekly reading. If you're interested in reading, stay tuned to the Plug Talk. Get that information, and let's get you where you need to be. After this break, we're going to get into this session. Welcome to the God Hour. You feel like you got a voice, feel like you got something to say? Feel like you have something that can move the masses or get everybody tuned in and you want a bigger audience? Whether it can be anything from something like the God Hour or anything from like sports, news, fashion week, whatever it may be. Let me put you on to something. The easiest way to do it is with the Anchor app. Biggest thing about it is free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will even do all of the distribution for your podcast for you so it can be heard on many other platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money. You also can make money from your podcast with a minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. It's everything you need to get your voice heard and get what you feel that's in your heart and into your heart out to the masses. If you're interested, download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Welcome. As I finish getting myself situated. Got the Palo Santo burner in the background. Welcome to the God Hour Show. I'm your host, Papa Lucifer, your occult psychologist. And this week we're getting into those ley lines. We break this down into 3 sessions. This first session, we're going to get into global warming. Or my take on global warming, like in the aspect of the study. When we think about global warming, or we think about like the villain, always trying to destroy the world, always trying to bring the new times, taking it to that state of the putrid, that's what you're doing in your healing work. When you're coming into understanding these ley lines, and doing this monumental work for yourself, grab my notebook. I got the notes written over here. You know, we keep notes all day. The first things that I always think about in there, I always think about this is the way I am and family and friends. I always think about this is the way we are and family and like that family aspect, or the people that were related to the aspects of the trauma that you've been through, the secrets that you kept, everything that was built based on that became that monument. When I'm breaking this down into this global warming aspect, it's changing the surface. The ley lines lay across these imagined. We learned about the equator, the lines, the longitude, and when you study the Kemetic sciences, and it breaks down the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, the pyramids here in the Americas, in heavy quotes, all of them were laid on ley lines. These monuments were laid because they were giving access to the power grid. So when you think about as above, so below, as within, as without, these ley lines or these monuments are reflections of the very constructs that you put into your life. The coordinates to finding the power source would naturally be the trauma and the aftermath of the trauma. Remember, we were talking about removing the obstructions last week. This week, we're getting deep into the aspects of when we remove these obstructions and why we remove them. It's not to become aesthetic pleasing. A lot of us like to remove the surface level and not really get down into that depth aspect of ourselves because we have this fear that if we expose this aspect of ourselves and not become vulnerable, we lose our power. The true fact of the matter is, similar to, I look back to when they were doing the whatever they were doing on TV, like when they were talking about pulling down statues and removing the statues and shit, because what they meant and what they represented back in that time, and it was a slave owner or a slave master or things of that nature. And it's like, okay, it was done based on emotion. Because if I look at those statues, I can care less what statue there is, what it represents. Because in that same case in point, there's an entire museum dedicated to slavery. There's an entire museum erected and dedicated to slavery. Think about that. And I'm pretty sure that's laid on specific ley lines as the martyrs for you to go and put your energy into. This is what I talk about, being on this grid, being of the matrix and not a part of the matrix. Everything's down here for you to learn from. So in my mind, it's like, if I sit here and I don't go back to the history of slavery being where I started, but there's an entire building that's erected that I'm pretty sure if kids are going there and that's what they're seeing, it just repeats the process. So what's the point of taking down one set of statues if we ain't taking down the other ones? So that we do these things based on this aesthetically pleasing us. We want to remove these aspects and these monuments that we've erected in our lives, but our ego doesn't let us. You've erected many monuments in your life, trauma-wise, and you won't tear them down. You fight back and forth with yourself to tear them down because you've not accepted, I've talked about this before, you have not acknowledged that you benefited from said trauma. How many times have you went back and when you get into an argument or something happens, the first thing that you're going to bring up is, my mother didn't love me, my father didn't love me, or my father loved me too much, or my uncle loved me too much, down to my brother or my play brother, play cousin, all these aspects. But you erect this statue of that in your life, this statuous aspect in your life that you draw power from, and it draws power from you. Every time that you do not go through the forgiveness process, you erect this statue or this martyr complex in your life. So now you become the martyr for the trauma. But as you start invoking the changes in your life, these key points, you start looking at these key points, you start realizing that you actually can go forward. I said it, I talked about it in the lecture last Friday. One cannot build or create or access the creation that lays dormant within them as long as they're moving through a realm of fear. They will only imitate up to a state of emulation from what they think illumination is, which means when you go study Adalderbroth and the demiurge, most of us we erect these demiurges in our lives through the emotional content, and we make them a deity. You've made your mother not being shit in your life the deity in your life. You made your father not being in your life, and whatever it may be, you have made up them a deity in your life, a statue in your life. They now lay on the ley lines where to you to access your power. So this is why you always kept in that high-end emotional state, because you need that in order to access the power, because you don't know how to access the power yourself. On the other end, whoa, that's strong. On the other end of this, that's exactly how they access your power. So when we talk about the matrix, getting off the grid, the only way you can get off something is because there's something that's already on. This path that we going in is not going to be based on, I'm going to get off the grid, I'm going to get out of the matrix. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not going to get out of the matrix. You're not going to get out of the grid. Off the grid. You are the matrix. You are the grid. Once you learn how to access the grid, once you learn how to access the matrix of your mind, the matrix of the design of yourself, we don't get into this, you'll understand why you sustaining that, you'll understand the reason why. For most of us, you don't even realize it. Everybody has an assignment. I'm saying this, we're breaking this down. Everybody has an assignment and everybody has a purpose. If you don't understand your purpose and understand your assignment, where your lines lay, then you don't understand everybody else's purposes in their assignment. You very well might be walking into a constant state of distraction all the time. That's where, and you're going in there for a reason, but you haven't caught the reason yet. That's why you keep repeating and going back through it all the time. That's why you're missing the key points of why you have to keep going over there. Because if you understood that, I use that as an example. With everything that I know now, based on my job, you use my old job, for example, I can't go back. It's not that I can't go back, because I can. It's just that there's something deep within. There's nothing deep within me to go back. Deep down into the core of myself, I know I can't go back. There's nothing inside me that triggers. There's nothing inside me that no longer is triggered by going back there. Similar, take that even deeper to an aspect. Like, there's certain people that I don't go around anymore because they don't register or trigger anything within me. I have the utmost compassion and understanding and respect for what they're doing and what they're going through and what they do. And I'm here for them. But there's that gap that's been created because the monument, that representation of me that was on that point, that in their ley line on that access point, is no longer there. They can't appease to that deity that I was at that point in time. You've always been a god. They can't appease to that deity and get access to me anymore. When I was in the lower aspects of myself, going through anger, going through that constant anger, going through guilt, going through grief, I was a lower level deity. I was in my lower levels, the lower levels of me being a deity. So they would come to me in that space. And this, when you start understanding balance, you have to understand duality to champion duality. You got to understand the separation, the need of separation, to not have to be in the aspects of separation once you become whole. You got to understand it separately to bring it together. You got to understand the dual aspects of it to bring it together. So when you're looking into that space of my mother, the deity that my mother created or deified of me, that I deified, co-created with my mother, with the relationship with my mother, no longer exists. She no longer can use the altars being my bedroom, being my old places I used to stay. All of those are your altars. All of those are your altars. This is where you got to be careful what you going around, because all of that shit, everywhere you go, everywhere that you go that you pour your emotion into, or you allow to pull your emotion, extract your emotion out of you, that is the altar. You are your emotions are your ego, your soul is the sacrifice. But when you're afraid of conflict, that friction that's going to be caused, that heat that's going to rise, them plate tectonics is going to emerge, the earthquake, the earth shaking and earth shattering shit is going to happen when you remove that statue of yourself and you actually get into your power and you start pulling your power to a new source. That's what you're afraid of. A lot of us get afraid of that. It's easy for me to, now if I go to anybody, if I go somewhere, I'm fully Papa Lucifer. There is no more Carlos. He's gone. He still exists. Deep down he exists, but he has the energy that he was used to transpire it. I have now become that energy in understanding it. So when I go into any space, it doesn't matter where I go, my energy now emits within that space. So I change things every time I go somewhere. I embrace and invest in the change. So in me and investing into change, the constant change, the cycle of changes, I become the observer of what I invest into my changes. I am aware of what I invest into the changes, that the aptitudes of change. That means every space that I go into, I'm built in that aspect to myself. I'm built into that aspect of myself. I'm built into that aspect of myself. That's how I work and that's how I move forward. This is going to be one of those key factors in you letting go of the old environment. The old environment was only based on sustaining you to a certain level until you achieved awakening yourself out of the cocoon stage. The cocoon takes friction to break out of. So therefore, those traumas that you've been through, those emotional onslaughts, as you learn balance, the balance is you kicking out. The balance is you kicking out of that cocoon or breaking out of that cocoon. A lot of us get stuck within these shells or those cocoons of ourselves because we got used to looking a certain way, acting a certain way, moving a certain way, because it gave us a certain quantity in life. We could say whatever it was. Yo, this is because of this that I do this. As long as you always got a reason to do something, you never can move forward. You never learn how to move forward. You never can embrace the higher aspects of yourself because you stuck within a mind frame. You stuck within a space that has you locked. You locked within a gridlock of a pattern. You just keep making the same circles and same squares and the same circle, dots on these same ley lines, being that one ley line for you can lead to the monument erected of your mother's house. What does your mother's house represent? What does your father's house represent? What does your sister's house represent? What does your brother's house represent? What do these people's houses represent? Those are the monuments that you have erected. You have co-created that monument. You put energy into that monument. That's why you keep going over there, because your energy's over there. There's no doubt to it. Your energy's still over there. Your energy, there's something for you still to learn within that temple. My young Jedi, there's something you need to learn in that temple. Until you accept it and acknowledge it, you can't move forward. That's like right now, going to my mom's house would do me no good and serve me no justice. I have no need or want to go to my mother's house. Now, if I decide to go to my mother's house, I can go to my mother's house, no problem. But I have no inherent first primary need to go to my mother's house because of what my mother's house represents. My mother's house represents an aspect of myself that I'm no longer of. My mother's house represents an aspect of me that I no longer need. There's nothing more I need to learn there. I've become my mother. I've become my pops. I've become my father. Once I become the statues of that, the statues of the identities, and I've embraced these identities, I understand these aspects of myself, I no longer need to go into that space. This is when you start understanding that as you build these layers up on those ley lines, this is why you're seeing certain things that happen inside of your life. I remember use it for an example, like the relationship between you and your mother. Really look at the next time you really look at the relationship between you and your mother. Look at who your mother is and what she is. Look at what your mother does. Go outside of emotion, because it's gonna trigger you. You have to see yourself inside of your mother. Look at your father. You have to see yourself inside of your father. The father figure, the maternal figure that was in your life. You have to see yourself inside them, because until you do this, you will continue to unconsciously imitate what they are. You will unconsciously imitate what they are, what they do, and how they act. You will unconsciously imitate it, because you either become what you love or you become what you hate. Either way, two sides of the same coin, you're going to do it. This is some real shit. This is some internal work for a lot of y'all. The relationship between you and your mother and how it's sustained tells you a lot about yourself. That relationship with family members, it says a lot about yourself. The friendships that you have, they state a lot of aspects of yourself. They're keys to the formulas, to the coordinates to your trauma. The family secret is a formula. All this shit's numbers. All this shit's numbers on that frequency pole. So look, next time, I'm going to give you something to do. The next time that you are around family, the next time you are around friends, sit there and observe. Just sit there. Don't say anything. Try not to say nothing. Just sit there. Observe them. Look at them. Look at how they act. Like, really look at how they act. Really, really start looking at these aspects, because you're going to have to do it. This is part of the shadow work. Really look at what they're doing and how they move, how they talk, what they doing, how they think. Really look at those things. Really start noticing them. What's the sign of these individuals that are in your life. Their zodiac sign, that is. Look at their zodiac sign. Like, yeah, look at their signs. I'm gonna give you some trippy shit. Like one of my brothers from way back, like 10, 15 years ago, we just naturally spread apart. But he was I want to say he was a Leo. One of my brothers was a Leo. He was a Leo. He was literally the subconscious, or he's my moon or my subconscious mind. So I remember the conversations I was having with him, and now when I look back on those conversations I had with him, I was only talking to my own subconscious. I was only trying to reprogram my own subconscious in that space. Because I was looking at it through an emotional point of reference, through the ego, I couldn't see why most of the conversation I was having was falling on deaf ears to certain people. Because I wasn't understanding it as a reflection or an experience to observe or an observation to experience. Once you start understanding this, you really ain't gonna get mad at shit anymore. I'm totally at peace 95% of the time. Knowing that when I get irritated, I know that's not myself, so I know I have to embrace learning. My awareness is going into, I haven't become aware of something. Something's not in the right place. But then I sit back, I'm like, okay, cool, let me sit here, and then I come back online. Because I'm no longer going to I'm consciously in the awareness that I'm not going to build anything on these ley lines or these access points in my life that's going to pull energy away from me. And this is what y'all gonna have to stop fucking doing. You keep giving your energy away by creating these statues and these temples. And we say the temple, we mean the masculine and feminine coming together. So you keep grading these temples based on the masculine and feminine aspects, and you keep coming together with these motherfuckers, building these temples all around the world. Some of y'all have built temples, don't even realize that you're building a temple. The temple is where the God dwells. So then you sit here and build a temple with somebody, and this goes into those aspects of once you marry yourself. That divine union within yourself. Because until you do the divine union within yourself, everything that you're going to be building on is going to be built on a foundation that's slighted by the temple that's trying to be built within that space. This is what I'm talking about, relationships. Those friendships that you built, those are temples. Those are the statues. On those, you erect the statues and you put the statues around this damn temple. So that temple that you built, the traumas that you have erected through in your life, you built a temple to it. And the family secret and the secrets that everybody that got the secret, they all now have access to that temple. This is why your energy be off when you start pulling away from that environment. That's why you still feel that need to go into that environment. Because you still got a temple built up over there. You still got that temple over there. You built, and you go celebrate over there every single year. Every single festivity, you want to go over there and be in that space, feeding the energy in that space. No matter how far along you didn't went ahead in your internal work, take it like this. You can take you can be doing your work on the surface level, and then after this, a week later go by, and then all of a sudden you start feeling weak again. Why do you think you keep going back to the same point? Because you address that you need to do the work, but you're not doing the work. You acknowledge that you need to do the work, but you're not doing the work. And for a lot of y'all going to be put in a space right now. Y'all look at like COVID-19 was the first wave that had y'all locked down into a position where you really had to do some fucking work. I talked about that all last year. All 2020. You was in a position where you were like, some shit had to melt. Them caps had to melt. That south node and that north node had to be acted. That you had to understand the north node and the south node of yourself. You had to be like, okay, cool, this is my north node. I'm becoming this. And everything that I'm going forward. Everything in my south node is what I'm going backwards to. That's that polar cusp. We don't get into that next. But that global warming aspect of you changing your globe, you're changing all the access points to you. All these temples that you have built are on the grounds of the trauma. So the longer that you don't acknowledge the trauma, the longer that these temples are going to stay erected. Go further out into the extreme of the spectrum. Them statues that are up with the slave owners and the masters, if you still get triggered by that, that means somewhere within inside your ass, guess what? You got some emotional internal conflict that you got to deal with. Because he who can invoke and evoke your emotions is your master. So how are you the authority of yourself? How can you erect anything new? And this is the reality of it. There's no more room to build for yourself. In your space, there's no more room to build. Because constantly, every time that you come into a space, you facing an obstruction that has to be removed. But you scared to remove it. Why? Ask yourself real questions. You ask yourself the truth and be honest with yourself, and you're going to allow yourself to go forward. That obstruction is stopping you from going forward. As you remove that obstruction, the underlines or the foundation is going to be built into it. And that's the correspondence. It's trippy how things correspond, because I'm going to give you an example. I cannot build the podcast and all of these aspects because I was in a space that I couldn't build in. Sometimes your purpose is not you can't build your purpose within certain spaces. You can't unlock that creativity, that energy in certain spaces. Bobby Hemmett talked about that with the Christos energy. If you go into a certain space with your energy on full, you are going to eradicate everything within that space. This is why you always put on pause when you're trying to do certain things. I'm in a position now where it's like, can't shit stop me. I have no doubts. I have no worries. Nothing can stop me from making the moves that I make and orchestrating the way that I orchestrate. Nothing can stop me. It's because I embrace that duat, that cusp. I'm in that duat. I'm in that cusp. The polar cusp. My north node is my access to my cusp. Getting into that cusp, into that duat, that Gemini energy, that coming in. My north node is the Gemini. So that's the masculine, that's the aspect, that's the twins. It's the masculine and that's the masculine and the feminine, understanding those genders and bringing them into balance. That's my access point. But we don't get deep into that when we get into this next part of the session. Y'all all right out there? Thank you for choosing the God out. Yeah, and we back to this next session. The polar cusp. As I was saying earlier in the beginning of the polar cusp, you're situated in my chair. As I was talking about the polar cusp, it's the north node and the south node. These are other key aspects and key points when we're getting into our understanding our ley lines and our trajectory points of not going back. Because if you keep going back to the same things, this is some real shit. If you keep going back to the same things over and over again, same dead end relationships, friendships, and all that shit, then, and everything is as above, so below, just in that thought, then don't you think you're doing the same thing in the spiritual aspect, in the astral realm of yourself? That's why your dreams keep repeating themselves. See, we get happy, little lucky, like, oh, I'm having a premonition of some shit. Nah, no. You want to make it seem, you want to go bypass it because you're still looking at it through your ego sometimes. This is not, and remember, I'm not talking to the ones that actually have premonitions. We see certain things. Me being a seer, we see certain things. even to the key of that for myself, one thing I had to learn was I had to let go of how I would say certain things. Because the first thing for myself when I actually started like seeing things or bringing things to the surface, I would get so emotional in trying to express it to people. I've always had that ability to just know it. But the thing that stopped me from being able to cultivate that gift was that need for acceptance. I was still stuck within my South Node being Sagittarius. I was still stuck in certain ways and certain patterns and certain attributes of myself in my South Node. I was still stuck in a lot of things in my ways, and I couldn't usher and move forward. So even though my intuition was on, I still was using my intuition through the aspects of my ego. I was still using my intuition through the aspects of my ego. So of course, every time I said something, it always seemed ego. It was always ego fueled. It was always an emotional aspect. There was never a balance to myself. And this is one of those major keys when you're moving forward. If you don't understand your North Node, into that depth, that's something that you really need to study. And if you want some access points, hit me up, and I do everything from constructing a natal chart analysis where I break down your natal chart in a deeper way for you to start seeing it line by line and get you into that access for that. And we go through it, and I also give you there's gobs and gobs of information that you get on that. But when we're coming into this space, now that we talked about global warming and that shield now going away. I always talk about greenhouse gases, destroying the ozone layer. That's destroying the layer that got you stuck down here. You are stuck within everything that you have created in your life has strengthened this magnetosphere or this gloomy aspect of your energy over your life. This is why when you start doing that healing work, when you first say, "Ooh, I'm aware and I'm awake and I'm conscious," you feel reiterated because you've accessed the magnetosphere. But now you got to remove these monuments that you put up in your life that we talked about earlier on. Those monuments that you put up in your life. These temples that you've erected, and you've given everybody access to the secret code to that space. The only reason that the code remains powerful, that formula can still be used on you, is because you haven't addressed certain aspects within yourself. This is why when motherfuckers get upset at secret societies, nigga, your family is a secret fucking society. Your uncle has been doing some outlandish shit for fucking years. Your family has a secret in the society that keep all y'all around it, because all secrecy is, when we think about what a secret is and the definition of what a secret is, I found a beautiful definition in when I was reading the other day. I can't even remember the name of the damn book. The wisdom and experience spoken through the memory of remembrance. That's all it is. The wisdom spoken through the voice of remembrance. So you holding on to that secret, that trauma, because it hurts you. It gives you this false sense of being stuck and afraid of conflict. This is for if you're, let's say like your North Node's Aries. That means you're going to face a lot of conflict in that grouping. When it comes into aspects, my North Node being Gemini, that means for me, this was my cycle for me of bringing things into balance and harmony by understanding and bringing myself into union. My yin and my yang, my twins, my energy, my yin and my yang, my masculine and feminine. So my North Node is Gemini. So that means that's the balance for me in that space. So when I go forward using the aspects of the Gemini, everything that I'm going to connect to is always going to show me the two. I'm always going to be looking at the two halves in order for me to get through that polar cusp, to allow that the fucking North Pole to melt. I need that shit to melt. I need all those old aspects of me to melt. You need that shit to melt away so you can actually access the duat, access the astral realm. Because some of y'all are not getting into the astral realm. Some of y'all are in the lower levels of the duat, that purgatory aspect. That's why a lot of y'all dreams be the same all the fucking time, and they always be something. You can tell what level you're in by how your dreams are playing out. So if you have a lot of dreams about death, suicide, old relatives, things of that narrative, more than likely you are going through an aspect of transition. It's your dream is telling you to transition. If you getting like Saturday and Sunday, I was chilling out with Barry White. He had this trippy ass hand, like he had this hand, like this glove like hand looking shit, and like he was like making music and playing with the water or some shit. Shit was trippy. I was having a whole conversation with him. 2.5 weeks ago, I had a whole conversation with who was I fucking with? He'll come back to me. But I was fucking with Barry White Saturday and Sunday. Me and him was chilling out, sipping by the bar, the astral, sipping by the astral bar, having a fire ass conversation. And he was like the one that, when I came back down here, that gave me the aspect of the ley lines and the monument. He was telling me about monuments and ley lines through the aspects of the music and the scores and the keys. When you look at the score, when you look at a score of music sheet, that is a reflection of the ley lines. Can you remember the universe being one song? That lines up to that. That's the ley lines. And every chord that you hit on, every note that you hit on there, it creates a pattern. It creates that note or that sound, and all that comes through, that creates a signature. So now looking at yourself in that space of the polar cusp and looking at these lines looking at these ley lines and these points, what notes have you erected to keep that trauma living? This is why you like certain songs. This is why you listen to certain music and certain music do certain things to you. The frequencies of that. Because you listening to music at a certain key and it makes you remember a certain thing. And then it goes right back to that fucking trauma. Everything you doing down here is to be observed and experienced to lead you into going deeper inside of yourself. You keep thinking that you stuck on songs about sex, and all the songs are about sex and exploiting women and exploiting our women. Nah, it's exposing the feminine aspect principle. It's exposing the feminine principle. It's exposing the feminine principle. If you trigger by it, use it. This is how you learn how to transmute shit. This is how you learn how to transmute energy. There's not one song that I dislike. There's not one, just like I told you when I'm at peace, there's not one song I dislike. I'm past that point. Because regardless of how I feel about any song, whether it's the WAP song, like no matter how I feel about this, it's still going to be played. Niggas is still going to listen to it. The next time you go on YouTube, this is real shit. Next time you go on YouTube and type in a song and you hit the little thing bar under it, you're going to see merchandise for the fucking song. You better learn how to tap in and transmute the fucking energy. This is what I keep talking about, being on each sides of these lines and in each one of these poles. You choosing a polarity to stay in, and then you against the other half of yourself. Now understanding that the other half of yourself is the foundation of how you build your new self. All that shit that you've been through, that's the aspect that you got to understand. It's nice. It's a dead tree. Think about it like this. If you take a tree and you cut that bitch and you cut a tree down and now you got the trunk now you got the trunk sitting there. You got the trunk sitting there. You can't grow shit bitten in that fucking spot. New. Only thing that's gonna grow is a new fucking tree based on the same fucking roots. This is what a lot of us do whenever we're coming into the aspects of our higher self. We still trying to build in the mud and in the dirt of where we fucking came from. The most you gonna build over there is an altar. You used to build the altar to sacrifice your humanity on that tree. You should build the altar to sacrifice the aspects of yourself on that fucking tree. Blood on the leaves. Stop trying to erect that, bring that shit back to life. I want my family to be this, because all you're going to be doing, remember, if you're creating, you cannot create through fear. All you can do is imitate and emulate. You cannot create through fear. All you can do is imitate and emulate. So until you address, as I said earlier, until you address these certain aspects in your life, you'll never be able to build something or create something or unlock what is dormant inside of yourself. It will always come out through a filter or an aspect of you that is not the true authenticity of you. Therefore, it will always be able to be augmented because it's coming through a false filter of an emotional aspect anyway. So you sitting there crying and crying and crying because your relationships don't work. You crying and crying and crying because your friendships don't work. They're not supposed to work the way you trying to make them work the way. If they work the way you want them to work, then you say you'll stay there. As above, so below. You ain't coming back here. The longer you fight it, the more it fucking hurt. You fight in the process. You find everything to blame for the process that you put yourself through. And then on top of that, you build on the surface. Now you got this surface level buildup of a whole bunch of other shit. And the first thing you want to say, it's time to get a new one. Oh, it's time to do something new. Or it's time to do something else. This shit's been ran to the ground because that's how you ran your fucking life. You ran your life in your self node. A lot of you have ran your lives in your self node your entire life. The first half of your life. Now that you're in this conscious phase and you're coming into this awakened phase, now it's time to really start focusing and looking at the aspects of your north node. In your north node, you're going to see line by line everything that you're about to face. Everything that you are going to have to face in order for you to champion into coming into your rising. My purpose is within my passion. My passion is within my intentions to teach and heal. The old world doesn't exist for me. I don't see it that way. I ain't got to go there no more. I'm not here anymore. For the most part, I'm not even here anymore. I'm happy. I'm ecstatic that I get to work from home. I'm ecstatic that I get to work from the crib. Got my office set up. Do readings, consultations, do their therapy sessions. I can do them via online all the fucking time because it's easy to do them online because it's a conversation to help them build. And if it got to get deeper, then if it has to get deep to a part where I got to travel or they got to travel to me, I got to travel to them, then that can be set up. But other than that, it's like we can have them conversations and do them builds. I'm in the space that I desire to be in. The next level for me in the space that I desire to go to is already in play. You only can see these aspects when you are paying attention to your path. You paying attention to the result all the shit all the things that are to be erected in the long term, you're going to bring into this short term view. And of course, anything that's based on the long term is going to seem larger than life or impossible for you to actually get to. Because you're looking at the long term shit in this short term goal post. But in the short term, all the shit right here that you seem as minuscule, you put into the back burner. This is what a lot of y'all do, and it reflects in the aspects of your work. This is why I tell people, it's like, there is no, because I did that shit, there is no, I'm going to get this, and this taken care of first, and then I'm going to work on me. Because what you're seeing in your life right now is, for a lot of y'all, you're seeing the results of that in your day-to-day life. I'll use the example of me getting my license. I'll use the example of me getting my license. For a while, I remember when I got my license, I could get a car. I was good. Got my car, boom, boom, boom. And I was following this same damn cycle because I had my license. But I was following this same damn cycle of I get my license, some shit happened on my record, license gets suspended or whatever. My license would never get suspended. It would never come to the point of suspension until the last time. It never came to the point of suspension until this last time about 3 years ago. And I sat there, I remember sitting there and I was like, God damn, man. And I remember something told me to actually call. I called the DMV. No, I called a lawyer's office and I said, yo, I'm supposed to get my license back. It's suspended. I need to know why. They were like, give us your information and then we'll go. They went to the courthouse. They told me, they called me back, let me know how much it would cost. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm sitting there in that space with my license suspended, so I couldn't get a car, so I was not understanding that my life was reflecting the works for me to come into myself. And then I was like, all right, cool. It was like, my lawyer said for $450 we get it done. Went there, handed the $450. And then they said it's going to cost this much when you go to the courthouse to pay this off, and boom, 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 and everything's good. I was like, all right, bet. Did all of that, sat there, cool. Now, how does this reflect into the aspects of my South Node and my North Node are melting away and coming into a higher aspect of myself? I ran out the old ways that I was doing things. Ran that shit out, couldn't do it anymore. Until I met this state of purgatory, or this state as above would be the purgatory and as below would be the suspension of my license. This is how you start looking at your life and seeing how taking this information and interpreting it into your space to do the work that you need to do. This is what I teach, and this is what I consult, and this is within the therapy that I provide. So I'm looking in my space. I'm like, okay, cool. I noticed that when I removed that suspension from my license, a whole bunch of other things catapulted into that space. Because when I did that, my old license and all my information was still at my mother's house. So that sent me to the trajectory of having to go to my mother's house to go get this information. So in order for me to go to my mother's house to go get this mail, I would have to have a conversation with my mother ultimately. I was riding the wave. You see how all these points are connecting and leading you back to the original point. I didn't for once think that I ain't gotta go talk to my mom. But I ended up having to go to my mother's crib anyway to go get the information. And it was the only thing I was doing was I was acknowledging a cycle in my life to where I had to keep doing this. But I caught on to what it was. For me, it was I had that fear of conflict. Because every time I would go to my mother's house, at this point in time, like my sisters were having mail go to my mom's house or whatever, and like my pops would always would always ask like, why they still got mail coming here? They don't live here. And in my mind, it didn't to what I thought it didn't faze me, that it did faze me subconsciously. Cause I was like, well, damn, I'm about to have some mail coming here because I got old mail coming here because this is my address. So then as I'm navigating through this space, I'm looking at these different conflicts and I'm noticing certain things that used to trigger me didn't trigger me anymore. The conversations that my pops used to have with us when he was giving us these long-winded lectures with his with Jesus, they didn't affect me anymore. I could construct a new stature or a new monument that pushed me past the limitations that were stuck within that space. I could fully understand everything that was going on within those spaces. This is going to be one of those key factors as you're removing the suspensions from your life. You're removing the suspensions from your life. Remember, everything's, as long as you're moving within the realm of fear, you will never create. You will only imitate and emulate and create new aesthetics within your space that still fit the same thing. You've been going in that spiral effect your entire life. And I'm giving you the keys to like, damn, I did not ever think about it this way. These are the keys when you're going into these interpretations. You're never going to get that new spot. You always going to keep getting the same spot, the same house the same way. You always going to think about getting this place the same way, the car the same way, the relationship the same way, the friendships the same way. You always going to think about them good. You're always going to think about them in thought and imitate what you believe is new, but you're going to keep pulling this old information into a state of suspension. Think about that. As long as you are still in the aspects of the cocoon phase, everything that you're pulling within to that space, naturally, if you try to use it in that space, it's going to be caught in a realm, it's going to be caught in a suspended state, which means you're not going to break out of the shell because you ain't going to see no need to break out of the shell because the shell is the old aspects of your ego. This is why whenever you get upset, this is your inner child. Your inner child in the lower aspects is your north node, or it's coming into itself. Your north node is your inner child coming into the full extent of itself. It's understanding its duality. It's understanding its the polarities. It's understanding the aspects of what it needs to go through. It's understanding the space within the shadows and creating that new light within yourself. It's awakening. That's why it goes into that rising sign. My rising sign being Scorpio, that means the aspects of passion. Do you think about all of the attributes of a Scorpio, the Scorpio rising, that's what I would be. And you see that in everything that I do. My high energy, my standing into my purpose, me doing everything that you're doing is naturally, whether you're consciously or unconsciously doing, you've been doing it the entire time. You just tapping into certain space. You just tapping into it. And then you create a monument there, or that statue there that we've been talking about in them ley lines. You create an access point to it. Until you fully understand it, you can't full access to the power. Because you're still stuck in a state of suspension. So the next time you look at your life, look at where this is going to make you look at your license being suspended, them outlandish fucking bills you got on your credit report, those channels and networks. Really, that when you're looking at those things, those overdrawn bank accounts, all of that has a source. And it's not the aspects of you look at it emotionally like, see, yeah, man, because I'm trying to survive. No. I was watching a movie the other day and like, there's always the narrative in almost every movie. When they start acting out and spending money Doing shit they ain't supposed to do, supposed to say laying low. First thing they say, yo, I'm just trying to survive. I ain't never had nothing. I'm just trying to survive and enjoy my life. That's what half of y'all are doing every year and year in and year out. Y'all live in these states of captivity, but you don't want to learn the aspect that you need to learn to take yourself out of that state of captivity that you're in. You live in these states of captivity with yourself. You live in these states of constant captivity, and not realizing that you're caught in these constant states of captivity is mainly because you're still in a state of captivity within yourself. That's the reason the captivity triggers you. You stuck in between the caps. You stuck in between the polarities, so you ain't even gotten to the cusp of your life. You ain't even gotten to the cusp to understand the cusp or the contradiction point. That's your access point to your higher self. The contradiction and the conflicts are what are going to help you get into the higher aspects of yourself. That's why the arguments become more prominent. That's why the protests came to a fucking high. Remember, every time something's at an emotional high, it's in a state of full decline. Do you notice that there hasn't been any state of emotional high other than with your dumb ass? You're in a state, every time you go into somewhere where it's at a high state of emotion, that means it's in a decline. That means it's at the end of a cycle. It don't mean it's the end of a cycle for them. It means it's the end of a cycle for you to go in there anymore. You ain't got to go there anymore. This is when we start understanding the aspects of emotion. We don't get into this grounding. We don't get into this throughout the week. But when you're going into these situations and you're seeing it's a high level of emotion and there's nothing else, this is a high level of emotion, anger, sadness, and all that shit, throwing shit, the insecurities is high, the jelly, all that shit's at an all-time high. It's at a state of decline. There's nothing more it can do. Until that is addressed, those imbalances are addressed, nothing else can be built within that space. This is why you have those arguments, and the first thing you do, whether it's the friendship, now you want to go take shots and have drinks with them, or you in a relationship with this some ragamuffin ass dude or some chick, the woman that you with or the guy that you with, and you hit that high emotion and y'all want to go have a sacred energy exchange because y'all recharging and recreating in that space. All you doing is imitating some shit. Cause what's the first thing y'all gonna go put on? Some old ass fucking, well, for the generation now, y'all putting on fucking Chris Brown and Trey Songz. And then you create to that mantra. You'll go put on the apology song, then you'll create to that mantra. Then you rebuild, then you construct your temple. You go lay down on the altar, then y'all go do it, or wherever you laying down at, that's the altar that you kick into. And then you subside the conflict. You dive back into the cycle. A lot of y'all have been diving back into these cycles. But after this break, we don't get into these channels and charts. Thank you for choosing the God Hour. And we are back. And now that we got a little bit of that underway with the laid that aspect of the polar cusp, understanding that north, south, north aspect, coming into our spaces of that global warming effect, that effect that as you rise, you're going to raise up some heat. You're going to cause some friction. Let the friction happen. We're going to get into these lines of engagement. Two of the things that I've learned to use in the lines of engagement in my study of myself, internal work, and how I move forward with is the human design is the channels or the networks in which in your natal chart of how each one of your houses are giving energy, how the energy flows to each one of your houses. This goes into the aspects of the chakra system and going all into that. So when you're thinking about your new lines of engagement or creating these new patterns in yourself, you have to first access the old lines, the old way that you use these lines. This is another key factor when you're doing your internal work that now that you are now embracing your new energy and your new power, you're not taking it back to the same old fucking houses. You're not taking it back. You're not powering these same old monuments, the pyramids and shit of that nature. You ain't taking it back to that old shit anymore. That shit don't fucking... That shit's over with. The only thing that is in those old spaces is the emotion. The high state of emotion that you haven't dealt with yet. It's always been at a decline. It's going to stay at a decline. It don't matter what you do. Then I'm going to give you an example. I give you a nice week, because you know I like giving you all the examples because it's therapy for me as well. None of my old relationships will work based on the high sense of emotion and the decline that it left in. The only way that the old relationships work for me now are they serve as the formulas to help me access something that I needed to learn. Remember, the past, the present, and the future are always in the same continuum. They're always in the same continuum. So me looking at the reflections of how I integrated with people in the past, places and things in the past, those relationships and how they were sustained are going to be key factors in me identifying the now points or the way that I engage in the ways that I engage in my now. If I look at it through the aspects of the emotion, then I'll always find a way out or a way not to. I'll always use it in a based of a reaction on the impulse. I'll always have a reason to stay within a certain position. Here's going deep into this example. My past relationships for myself, they were always based on the same core. I would be advancing. They would fall back or they'd be falling behind. And then I would call myself waiting to try to pull them forward. What I was trying to do was, not realizing it, was I wasn't really giving them space to learn how to grow. I was trying to take them through a conversion process to see what I see and understand what I understand. The reason that I pushed so hard, one of those layers was, if I could pull them forward or convert them into this space where I'm at, I wouldn't have to do the internal work for myself. So the way that I engage things in this narrative, in this space for myself, was always based on what I had externally and what they didn't, what they lacked. Or in that same aspect of what they had and what I lacked. When we come into these spaces with ourselves in the way that we're engaging in these spaces, it's always going to be based upon something that you lack or something that you have. In the internal, you lack something, so you're looking for what. So in the internal, you may lack something, or you haven't done that internal work. So externally, you have a high regard for something. So you put yourself on this external pillar or this external pedestal of, I can do this, I'm independent, I'm this, this, and this. All you're acknowledging through all of those filters that we keep getting into is the lack thereof that you're only imitating something. Because that became your definition that you now stand on inside your space as you engage that line. And you won't go anywhere past that line, or now you have this space in yourself when we're in that polarity where your truth and my truth may not meet. And that's cool. That's the conflict point that we have to address. Why is your truth your truth? When I have conversations, it's like, why is your truth your truth? 9 times out of 10, when I ask that to people, they can't give me an instilled aspect of why their truth is their truth. They can regurgitate some things, but they can't give me a clear interpretation of why their truth is, why they stand on that. This is what you're going to be going into aspects of you learning yourself. Because some people they'll get stuck in a certain aspect just based on it because it makes them feel good, but it doesn't make them feel better. It doesn't get them any better because it's a nice foundation. You cannot be admiring the results of the foundation that you built. Keep building. Do not get stuck in admiring the aesthetics of the foundation that you have built. Keep building. See, a lot of times we come into this space with ourselves and the admiration of our work is based on the obsession. There's that thin line between the admiration and obsession. That obsession channel that we get stuck in is still based on the emotion, it's still based on reaction, impulse, the feeling, never getting to the emotional aspect. See, when you admire things, admiration requires self-awareness. One that obsesses is not aware of themselves. One that obsesses is not aware of themselves. One that admires or holds high regards to their admiration is based on their self-awareness. See, one that is obsessed will try to find perfection, not understanding that perfection is balance. But the one that is in admiration and admires their genius, admires the processes in their genius, understands that balance is perfection is simply aspects of understanding the balance. See, when we come into our space a lot of times, when we're trying to make shit perfect, we'll find ourselves looking for the result and waiting until something happens. So you'll sit there and you'll wait for something to happen or wait for something to come into that space in order for you to say, okay, cool, now I'll start my work. Now I'll start working on myself once I get all of this perfected. Now understanding that by you saying perfection, that it's in balance. You just can't see it's in balance. I'm going to give you the trippy part about understanding shit being in balance. You've always been in balance. I'm going to give you an aspect. I'm going to give you a trajectory of balance. You go to your house. In your house, your house is clean. Your house is clean. Laundry put away. Everything's nice and neat. Trash. Your house don't smell like trash. Everything good in your crib. If you go outside of your house, I can guarantee it. If you go to a friend's house, based on obsession to you keeping your house in order, if you go to your friend's house and you see their house is in shambles, there's a reason that you got them in your house. There's a reason that you keep them in your space. So you have an example of what it looks like to not have my house look like that. You keep an example around you of what you don't want your relationship to be like. You keep examples around you of other individuals around you, so you're like, I never can go back to looking like that. And as long as you keep this obsession narrative, trying to find perfection, this is when you keep trying to tweak things because you ain't getting the necessary views. This is when you start tweaking things because you ain't getting the results that you believe that you deserve. You ain't built that within inside of yourself yet. You ain't built that space within inside of yourself yet. So of course you ain't gonna get it outside of you. This is the reality of the space that you in. You running around mad and upset at people because they're not doing, and now you trying to convert everybody to your shit. You've been doing it ever since. Most of you get stuck within the aspects of, most of you are stuck because you are not acknowledging the original conspirators of your setting. You are one of the original contributors, the original conspirators against your setting. You are the last conspirator of set. As long as you stay in your trauma, stay within that old monument, stay representing, stay worshiping, stay creating these deities in your space, you are the last conspirator of set. Everybody in your space is the last conspirator of set. They are using the old aspects that they have become aware of to live within that space. They're stuck within the light of the old space. Why you think niggas love to shine when why you think the first thing they show you is shiny jewels and shit? Why you think the first thing you try to go get to naturally is something shiny? And then you say you're going to do your work once you get that house. You say you're going to do that work once you get that job. You need that external before you get to the internal. Why you think you always keep going through the same fucking cycle? Because you keep going back to the status quo of yourself. If I get this job, then I won't have to worry about this. Yeah, you will. Because without that worry, you won't get that next job. Without that stress, you won't have, without that stress or that lack, without the stress of the lack, you will now have to learn how to create. Without the fear, now you are coming out of the cocoon, and now you are awakening what's dormant inside of yourself. Some of y'all are literally your head sticking out the cocoon, or your feet sticking out the cocoon, and now you running around fucking ragged. You running around even faster ragged. Now you got more energy, but now you running around ragged because you haven't embraced taking the whole shell off. You ain't ready for that part yet. It's okay to admit that. It's okay to admit that you got to do some work to yourself. It's okay to admit that you got to do that internal work. This is why I be suggesting to motherfuckers that you cannot skip the process. Stop trying to skip these steps. Because the longer that you skip these steps, you're always going to find yourself back in one of them old ass temples. The ruins of your old life. Which takes you into the deeper aspect of why all of those ruins are still there. They're to show you that they're the ruins of the old. There's no more erecting that shit. Stop erecting the old shit. It's like when motherfuckers literally sit here and will say, we can't wait till we get back to running the planet. I don't want to run the prison. I don't want to run the prison. I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to run the prison. So if that's your goal to build and run the prison, then by all means have it. My aspect of my thought process is to build my legacy. I am my legacy. My legacy is based on my foundation of which I've healed myself through. That's my legacy. My legacy is within the divine unity of myself. So everything that I bring into my legacy or into my space, this is when you start understanding legacies and why motherfuckers go so hard to protect their legacies. And you always hear like the aspect like, we got to protect the legacy, got to protect the family. You start understanding these aspects of why you don't let certain people into your shit. But you look at it based on emotion. This is why when you look at, we'll use Asians for that example. Asians, Indians, when you look and they say you don't mix these aspects because it will taint the bloodline or it taints the line. Every time that you allow these foreign energies or these foreign entities into your life, you're tainting your bloodline. You're tainting your line. You're tainting your legacy because you keep letting the tainting of your legacies is the emotional aspects that keep coming in, these emotional things that you allow to bring impurities into your space. This is why sage kills 99.9%, 99.8%, 99.8% of bacteria in your house. But it does you no good to burn the fucking sage if you keep going back into the old spaces. Because what's going to happen in the natural investment of the change, you keep taking the sage into that space. The sage is because the first time you do a wave, like we used to say, I don't know how the hell we got into sage. You sage yourself. And you start coughing and shit. And like, I love the smell of sage. It makes me feel more at peace. And now you go into a space. What you're programming into your space, because it's all about programming yourself. What your programming is, I've saged myself to clear myself of negative energy. Because that's the first aspect when you're clearing yourself. But if I keep going into negative spaces, the negative energy becomes impervious to the sage. Because what you're acknowledging subconsciously in your mind is that this is not a space of negativity. And it don't matter what the fuck you say. It's not a space of negativity. It's within my lines of engagement. But the natural aspects of your body, that's when you start feeling weak and you tired and you sick and you don't want to do shit. That's why you keep going down that same fucking that same red brick road. But I don't know how we got into that subject. But now you're coming into this space for yourself where you're going to need these new lines with yourself. And that's all broken down. That's when you look at your natal chart. That's when you start looking at your human design and understanding those channels. If, for example, if you're a generator, that means you're a builder. That means every time you go into a space, you are building something. What are you building? That means in order for you to become the true builder and erect the true aspects of being the builder, that means first you got to become the destroyer. That's the destroyer aspect of the God realm to yourself. So right now you're coming into your higher aspects of yourself and you're noticing that there's no more building right now. You in a state of destruction. I remember Bobby Hemmett talked about that aspect, talking about we're in that state of destruction. You're in a state of destruction. Everybody's going through their shit at a different point in time. But it's all leading to the same point. So you may be in your state of destruction because the examples around you are a state of destruction. For someone like myself, I'm in a state of building because I went through my states of destruction. So for me to observe others' destruction is based on me understanding the experiences of my building. Do you see how it works now? You see how it comes together? Everybody's in their position. They have an assignment. If you're stuck on their assignment, then guess what you get? If you stuck on their assignment, then you never get to your assignment, then how can they ever have an example to look at? That's the space that's created, that gap that's created. It's up to them to fill the gap. So you keep going back to go try to refill. Every time you go back into a space that's no longer suitable for you, you bridging the gap. That means, guess what you end up doing? Now you got to repeat every step that you just went through to get back to the space that you were just at. And the reason that you keep going back is because you focused on results. So you repeat the path over and over and over again. This is the devil going to and fro. This is Perseus dying over and over and over again. Never remembering the path. Only aware of the result. Going over and going to and fro. This is you going back and forth. This is your path to that of Perseus. You going back and it's not Perseus. Is it Perseus? I want to say it's Perseus. It's Perseus. Like you going back and forth because you keep trying to give these motherfuckers fire. You keep trying to give these motherfuckers over here information that they're not ready for. So now you keep killing yourself to keep going back and forth to keeping these motherfuckers information they're not ready for. Information is light. If they're still stuck within the darkness, or if they have not acknowledged their shadows, it don't matter what light you bring down there. So your light gonna seem real good to them because they stuck in the aspects of that light. They can't use it. This is why you start getting upset when you start having conversations with people and they just don't understand what you're saying. They're not ready for that light. They're not ready at that frequency. You're going to start noticing it more and more, especially going forward now, since we had the end of cycles. Since we're at the end of a lot of cycles, you're going to start noticing a lot more and more. You're going to notice that friends and family members that sweep shit under rugs. You're going to notice that the job keep doing it. You're literally going to feel it on every aspect of your life. Your job ain't going to cut it no more. The place that you stay ain't going to cut it no more. Friendships ain't going to mean much anymore. You've been doing it over and over and over again, repeating that path to and fro between heaven and earth. But you ain't understood the aspect like, nigga, what I'm supposed to be? I'm concentrating on going back and forth in these results. I ain't looking at this path. Let me look down real quick at this path. When you look down, you'll notice that there's always been two paths in front of you. There's the path that's going to lead you out and the path that's going to keep you coming back in. That's split. Always been two paths right there in front of you. But you concentrating on the result. Trippy as fuck. Well, it's okay. This is how you're going to start understanding these new lines of engagement for yourself. How you walk forward, how you move forward, what you do, you being triggered, all this shit, your PTSD kicking in, you being triggered by all this shit making you angry right now and all of that shit. It's acknowledging the conflict for the new lines of engagement in your life. It's time for you to start engaging and setting those new parameters in your life. It's been time for you to start accessing the aspects of your North Node. All of this is the results of you going into the higher aspects of yourself, your North Node. Your North Node is your heaven. Your North Node is your higher self. Your North Node is your heaven. Your North Node is your higher self. And you rise into the new aspects of yourself. My rising is Jupiter. My rising is Scorpio. Scorpio is Judas. Judas kissed the old paradigm on the cheek to usher in the new. As I understand the divine unity of myself, or my yin and my yang, or my Gemini, I no longer am forced to, I'm no longer stuck within the aspects of the my Sagittarius or my South Node. That means I'm no longer stuck in the attention and the rebellion aspects based on my ego or my son, I'm now into the phases investing into my changes and bringing attention to my changes through my Leo moon. And in my Venus being in Mercury, that's always the aspect of me always being steadfast with information. So all of my channels, when I look at the channels in my head, my 6 or 61 in my head, that's the occult knowledge. So I wear my crown on my head of the occultist into the mind of being open. That's the psychology, opening the mind, psychoanalysis. And now I'm in my purpose. I've built my temple on the ley lines by destroying the old aspects of me that were once erected of my old self. This is your key. This is your key. I just want you to be the fucking best. It's always hot everywhere I go. I'm always in a state of global warming and changing the way things think. And I love it and I embrace it. I want you to heal and become better. But you got to understand what's suspended in you. The suspensions in your life and what has you in a state of suspension. What has you in a state of... Those are the things that are reflective of the works that you need to do within inside of yourself. I still remember the time when I still owe money to taxes. And the aspect behind taxes is like, they're always going to come get it if you're not using it. Because it's still attached to you. So now that I am in the ownership mentality and I've literally built an LLC, everything is now a write-off. Everything that I use is now a write-off. That's your key. Once you understand these lines and how they lay out, everything becomes a write-off. You use it for what it needs to be used for. You take it in for what it needs to be taken in for. Take the information that's permitted from it, and then you allow yourself to move forward. You can write it off. Invest in the change. Today's the only day that matters. Stay tuned for the plug talk. Message from our sponsors, then we gonna close this out. Appreciate you for tuning in for the God Hour. Welcome. You know what? Before we do the closeout, you know I gotta give you that God Talk plug talk. Last week we got into breaking invitation, Friday night lectures. This week we gonna go a little bit deeper. We always going deeper into these aspects. Share, subscribe, tune in every Friday night for a new topic is founded upon in aspects of our healing, going into our shadow work. GodaCoAlchemistLLC.com. You know that's the place for the services from the readings. Set up that consultation today, especially if this or any other episodes that you listen to, they resonate with you and it's like, okay, cool, now what's my next step? The next step, let's get that consultation put in, that shadow work consultation, and that is the steps to unlocking the inner child and bringing yourself face to face to the shadows and dealing with it in that safe space, as I've been told. I appreciate all the support on that. Follow me on Facebook at Rockcaller Nijas. Follow me on Instagram at Papa_Lucy666. And stay tuned for more of that. Of course, the Occult Alchemist Book Club, the Study Secret Society is still coming soon. Stay tuned for more information on that. I want you to be the fucking best. This has to become your normal. Making this your new scene. as we talked about in this episode, everything that you've been through is the template or the table of contents to bring the unseen into the scene, bringing you into your enlightenment. Everything down here is meant for you to come to take you through those passages of your enlightenment. The harder your path, the deeper your purpose. But you got to understand your purpose. Yeah. Just loving them, vibing with the beat. But I appreciate the support. Everybody that comes through and Friday night lectures, everybody that comes through and hits up Occult Alchemy, my Shopify.com. Everybody hits the Cash App link to support the growth, support the for the love and the resonates for them in the classes. Everybody that comes through that, it lets me know that I'm in the. It reinforces what I already validate within myself, because I want to see you become the best. I want to see you exceed and become the best, because that's what I want to. That's what I desire for myself. Remember, everything is meant to be. Everything is either to be observed or experienced, but you do not have to experience it firsthand for the observation to be understood, and vice versa. It's been an episode of the God Hour. You listening, of course, on a Tuesday, today, being on it matters. Tune in. That's why you need to follow me on Facebook. Rock Calling Needs for the God Hour Show, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, we don't get into grounding. You don't get into grounding tonight. Stay tuned for this last break. And oh yeah, if you're interested in becoming a sponsor on the podcast, sponsor, monthly patron, hit me up at setcarlonegis@gmail.com to schedule that dialogue so we can get you in there plugged into the Plug Talk. You become a sponsor if you have a product, a service, a book, you want to do a bill. Hit me up in the email, and we can do that bill. Because all we doing is building and taking ourselves to the highest level over here. All we doing is growing over here. You feel me? So yeah, stay tuned for this break, and we're gonna get into this closeout. Thank you to the God. I love you. You love us. Ashe. And yeah, take a sip of my drink. Over here drinking bamboo straight, no ice, cause we guys over here, shit don't burn. Shit still got a burn to it. But yeah, understanding that there will be friction. Understanding that those old caps of where you got stuck at are going to melt. Understanding that there's going to be new lines and access points. Once you access the lines and access points, you now engage differently. These are some deeper keys in you going into your aspects of understanding shadow work. Why are you doing the work you need to do? Why are you working on yourself the way you need to work on yourself, and why it's so important to work on yourself to come into this aspects of self. I remember even for me, one of the biggest things that happened to me when I was coming to the aspects of myself was finding grounding in the truth of what myself was. It wasn't that I was scared to be selfish. It was the aspects that I didn't understand what selfish truly being, what the aspects of me being selfish truly meant. Me being to myself truly meant. I didn't understand the aspects of what loving myself truly was. Being in love with myself, being authentic with myself, being true to myself, and being in that space overall with myself. I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't understand what it meant for my light to emit and to shine. And even when I remember older women, like the grandmothers and my grandmother's friends, and like the older elders that were in my life that would see me and be like, you have a light to you, but it seems dim. You have a bright light. You had a bright light when you were at this point. You had a bright light, and I see that light in you. And it's just crazy we hearing that now, because now I'm in that space. I understand what it means. It's like I've rejuvenated. The way that they see you will always be the child. That's why they've always seen you as a child. Your mother, your father, everybody's always going to see you as that child. I don't care how old I get, my mother's still going to see me as that 10-year-old boy. Period. Your mom is always going to see you as that little girl. They're always going to see you as the inner child. That's going to be the key to you to accessing this energy. They're always going to see you as the inner child. Because they're in their space, when you start really seeing them, you're going to, this is the key, this is one of the keys when you're coming into this grounding. You're going to start seeing their inner child. They're nothing but a child you're seeing the attention that they're trying to receive through the aspects of their inner child. You're going to fight back and forth with it because you haven't accepted that your inner child and their inner child is trying to interact. This is time to get grounded. And speaking of grounding, that's this week's. If you are tuning in Tuesday on the only day that matters, because every other day is simply a repeat that we invest into the changes of each day, then tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, God Hour show, we don't get into grounding. Deeper aspects of understanding how you're grounding yourself and bringing yourself into that new space. It's been another episode of the God Hour podcast. I want you to be the best. I want you to be great. Allow the message, allow it to resonate, because as Papa Lucifer, I'm speaking to your soul. And the only way to get access to what me and your soul is talking, how our souls are speaking, is by turning down the ego, acknowledging the shadow, and the deeper that you're going to go. I love you. We love us. Y'all will hear from me throughout the week and next week. Peace.